If you clicked on this video, you're probably expecting a ghost story. This isn't that. What I'm about to tell you is something I've avoided putting into words for over a decade, not because I'm afraid of how it sounds, but because of what happens when you document it. I'll explain that later. Before I go any further, I need to say this. Some of the details in this story are disturbing. Not in a violent way, in a way that makes you question whether you understand how the world works. If that's the kind of story you're here for, make sure you're subscribed, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, especially if you've ever driven through northern Arizona at night. My name is Daniel Mercer. I've been the sheriff of Coconino County for 11 years. Before that, I spent 9 years as a deputy under Sheriff Alan Crowley, who held the position for almost 3 decades. If you've never been to northern Arizona, it's difficult to understand how empty it is. People think of Arizona and picture Phoenix or Flagstaff. But once you leave those towns, you're in high desert and pine forest that stretches for miles without a single structure. There are long, straight highways cut through black volcanic rock, and county roads that twist through forests so dense your headlights barely reach the tree line. At night, it's darker than you think darkness can be. Our department doesn't handle a huge volume of calls. What we handle is distance. A single deputy might cover 800 square miles in a shift. Response time isn't about traffic. It's about geography. When I took over as sheriff, Alan Crowley sat me down in the office I still use today. He went over everything you'd expect: staffing levels, seasonal tourism surges, wildfire protocols, coordination with state police. We talked budget constraints, equipment upgrades, emergency response planning for snowstorms. Then he pulled out a laminated shift grid. It divided the day into 15-minute blocks. Every hour had at least one active patrol unit assigned, except for one window. Between 2017 a.m. and 3003 a.m., the box was blank. At first I assumed it was an oversight. It wasn't. Alan tapped that empty block with his finger and said, "No patrol, no dispatch response unless it's confirmed life-threatening." And even then, we wait until 3003. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He explained that the directive had been in place before he became sheriff. It wasn't written in any official manual. It wasn't entered in the policy documentation. It was passed down verbally from one administration to the next. I asked him why. He said, "Because the roads don't behave during that window." That's the exact phrase he used. I remember leaning back in my chair, waiting for clarification. He didn't give it immediately. Instead, he opened a drawer and took out 3 manila folders. They were old, edges worn. Inside were patrol summaries from different years. Not official incident reports, those had been filed normally. These were personal notes deputies had submitted directly to the sheriff. Each one described the same pattern: travel times that didn't match distances, GPS units placing deputies on roads that didn't exist, odometers showing correct mileage while the clock said too much or too little time had passed. One deputy wrote that he radioed in from mile marker 201 on Highway 89 at 2:26 a.m. According to dispatch logs, he radioed again from mile marker 173 at 2:20 head. That's a 28-mile difference in 6 minutes. He hadn't accelerated stu a.m. That's a 28-mile difference in 6 minutes. He hadn't accelerated. He hadn't turned around. His dash cam showed continuous forward travel. Alan told me he had personally driven during that window twice in his early years, trying to prove it was fatigue or equipment malfunction. He said both times he ended the drive feeling displaced, not confused, displaced, like he'd arrived somewhere slightly adjacent to where he meant to be. He never did it again. I asked why the window was so specific, 2:17 to 3:33. He said the times weren't chosen randomly. Over years of informal documentation, deputies noticed anomalies starting at 2:17 almost exactly, not 2:15, not 2015. And whatever was happening always settled by 3003, not 303, 303. I asked if anyone had tried to formally investigate it. He said yes, and that was a mistake. In 2004, a previous undersheriff requested technical analysis from the state regarding GPS interference. Within weeks, state oversight began asking questions about inconsistent location data. The more documentation they provided, the less sense it made. Eventually, the department was advised to recalibrate equipment and improve reporting standards. The anomalies continued, so they stopped documenting them. And instead, they stopped driving. Alan closed the folders and looked at me for a long moment. "Dan," he said, "you can try to fix it, or you can respect it." I kept the protocol. For the first 6 years of my tenure, it worked. Deputies adjusted shift rotations. Dispatch would advise callers that response might be delayed during that window. Most nights, nothing happened anyway. It was statistically our quietest time, until the night it wasn't. The first real incident that forced me to reconsider the policy happened in my 7th year as sheriff. It started at 2:16 a.m., and the deputy involved swears she never crossed 2717. But according to every clock we have, she did. The deputy on shift that night was Elena Alvarez. She'd been with the department for 5 years, solid record. Calm under pressure. The kind of deputy you trust alone on a winter highway at 2 in the morning. Her shift ran from 6000 to 2:30 a.m. Standard late coverage. At 2001 a.m., she radioed dispatch to say she was finishing up a traffic stop near Forest Road 418. No citation issued. Just a warning for a broken taillight. Her tone was normal, clear. At 2014 a.m., dispatch acknowledged and logged her heading south toward Highway 188. Estimated arrival back near the main corridor at 2022. Routine. At 2016 a.m., she made another radio call. That's where things shift. Her voice was steady, but quieter than usual. She said, "Dispatch, confirm time." Evelyn, our night dispatcher, replied, 02:16. There was a pause. Then Alvarez said, "Copy, I'm approaching the split near mile marker 243. Road looks tighter than usual." Evelyn asked her to clarify. Alvarez said, "It's like the shoulder's gone. Tree line feels closer. That stretch of road is straight, wide shoulders. Dense pine forest set back at least 20 feet from pavement." Evelyn pulled up highway camera feeds. Nothing unusual. Visibility clear. No weather interference. At 2:17 a.m., exactly 2:17 a.m., exactly 2:17, Alvarez's radio crackled. Static. Not the kind we occasionally get in forest coverage. This was heavier. Layered. Like overlapping transmissions. Then silence. Evelyn attempted contact 3 times. No response. Department protocol says no patrol response between 2017 and 3003 unless life-threatening emergency is confirmed. This was not confirmed, but it was a deputy. I was home that night, monitoring radio traffic as I sometimes do. When Evelyn called my cell at 2:20, I was already sitting upright in bed. She explained the situation. Loss of contact at 2017. Last transmission suggested environmental irregularity. I asked one question. Did she cross 2017? Evelyn said. She was talking when the clock turned. That mattered. If she had completed her travel before the window began, we could justify dispatching another unit. But if she was in motion when 2:17 hit, we wait. That's the rule. I told Evelyn to continue attempting radio contact but not to send anyone out. Those 46 minutes were the longest of my career. At 2:31 a.m., Alvarez's GPS pinged on the dispatch map, but not where it should have been. Her patrol unit appeared 11 miles east of Highway 188, deep inside a fire access road that hadn't been drivable in years. Evelyn thought it was a glitch. She refreshed the system. The dot remained. At 2:36 a.m., the GPS dot moved. North, through terrain no vehicle could physically navigate. No roads, no paths, just forest. We considered it equipment malfunction. We had to. At 2:42 a.m., Alvarez's radio clicked on. No voice, just engine noise. But the pitch was wrong. If you've worked patrol long enough, you recognize idle RPM by sound. Her engine sounded strained, like it was climbing a grade. There are no grades in that direction. Evelyn tried again. Unit 12, confirm status. Nothing. At 2:48 a.m., GPS froze. At 2:52 a.m., the dot disappeared entirely. No signal. That's when doubt creeps in, not panic. Doubt. You start asking yourself whether policy is the right choice, whether this is the night someone dies because you respected a rule that doesn't make sense on paper. At 3:03 a.m. on the 2nd, dispatch time rolled over. Evelyn looked at me. I had driven to the station by then and didn't need to ask. We dispatched 2 units immediately. Highway 188, mile marker 243. The road was normal. Wide shoulders, tree line distant. At 3:21 a.m., Deputy Mark Jensen radioed that he'd found Alvarez's cruiser, parked diagonally across the northbound lane. Engine off. Headlights on. Driver door closed. No sign of collision. No skid marks. Alvarez was inside, sitting upright, hands on steering wheel, eyes open. Jansen said she didn't respond when he knocked, but she wasn't unconscious. She was breathing normally. He opened the door and said her first words were, "Why is it wider again?" They transported her to Flagstaff Medical for evaluation. No drugs in system, no head trauma, no seizure activity. Blood work clean. When I interviewed her later that morning, she was composed, but unsettled. She said at 2016 a.m. the road began feeling compressed, not visually distorted, physically compressed, like the forest was leaning inward. She said the pavement looked intact, but the space felt wrong, like driving through a tunnel that hadn't been there before. At 2017, she remembers checking the clock. It read 2017. She said she slowed to 35 miles per hour. She remembers passing mile marker 244. Then 275. Then she said something I can't fully explain. She said the road narrowed to a single lane without any visible construction or barriers. Not visually, spatially. She said it felt like if she extended her arm out the window, she could touch the tree line, but she didn't see trees that close. She said she never turned off Highway 188, never left the pavement, never entered forest access roads. The next thing she remembers clearly is Jensen knocking on her window. I showed her the GPS playback. She stared at it for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "I never drove east." According to the system, she drove 17 miles off route, through terrain no vehicle tracks were found in. And here's the part that kept me up the following night. Her odometer showed exactly 94 miles traveled, which is the correct distance from the traffic stop location to mile marker 243. No more, no less. But 46 minutes had passed, and she swears she never crossed 2017. According to her, she never entered the window at all. After Deputy Alvarez was cleared medically, the first thing I did was secure her patrol vehicle, not because I suspected foul play, because I needed to see what she saw. Every patrol unit in our department runs continuous dashcam recording. Radio stores locally and uploads when the vehicle reconnects to station Wi-Fi. Alvarez's cruiser hadn't uploaded yet, so we pulled the hard drive directly. Luis Ortega, my undersheriff, and I reviewed the footage in my office at 9:40 that morning. The video begins normally. Timestamp 02-12-08. Clear night, dry pavement. Pine forest, set back from the highway exactly as it should be. Alvarez driving at a steady 52 miles per hour. No traffic. At 02-15-54, she passes mile marker 242. Everything matches reality. At 02-1641, the first change occurs. It's subtle. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. The headlight beams look shorter, not dimmer. Shorter. Instead of extending deep into the lane ahead, they appear to stop abruptly, as if swallowed by darkness sooner than they should. Louise paused the footage. "Could be camera exposure," he said. "Maybe, but the rest of the image brightness remained constant. At 02 DOS Quen 1658, Alvarez's speed drops from 52 to 38 miles per hour. Right as the dashboard clock turns UO2 11700, the moment we've been watching for. At 02 17006, something happens that neither of us could explain. The lane markers, the white shoulder line and yellow center stripe, begin drifting closer together, not visually bending, not warping, moving inward, frame by frame. Luis leaned forward. "Is that compression?" he asked. I didn't answer. By 02 1721, the shoulder line appears less than a foot from the center stripe. The road looks like a narrow backcountry pass instead of a state highway. But the trees, they're still positioned far back. The forest doesn't move. The pavement shrinks. At 02 11733, Alvarez says on audio, "Dispatch, confirm time." Exactly matching what Evelyn logged. At 02 17049, the radio static begins. The image flickers once, just a single dropped frame. Then the footage continues. At 02 11812, Alvarez slows to 31 miles per hour. The lane markers are now nearly touching. The vehicle remains centered. She is not swerving. She is driving as if nothing is wrong. At 02 1844, the dash cam shows something that still doesn't sit right with me. The trees on the right side of the road appear closer, not dramatically, but enough that the headlight beam now catches bark texture clearly, which should not be possible on that stretch. The shoulder on Highway 188 is at least 8 feet wide. In this footage, it appears less than 2. Luis paused it again. "Is there construction there?" he asked. "No," I said. "We had driven that exact stretch 2 hours earlier. Nothing had changed." At 02 1933, Alvarez mutters something barely audible. We increased volume. It sounds like she says, "This isn't right." At 02 1911, the image glitches. Not static, not digital distortion. The road ahead looks duplicated. For 3 frames, there appeared to be 2 versions of the highway slightly misaligned, like transparent overlays offset by a few inches. Then it snaps back to a single image. Luis rewound it 5 times. The glitch remains. At 02 11940, something even stranger happens. The dashcam GPS overlay, the small coordinate display in the bottom corner, begins flickering. Latitude numbers shift rapidly, then freeze, then display coordinates placing her several miles east, while the video clearly shows her still on Highway 180. The road continues narrowing. At 02 2002, the center stripe disappears entirely. No fade, no transition, it's just gone. Only dark pavement ahead, no markings, no reflectors, but the road surface itself looks intact. At 02 2026, Alvarez slows to 22 miles per hour. The audio picks up her breathing. Not panicked. Focused. Controlled. At 02 251, the screen cuts to black. No transition. No power down animation. Just black. The timestamp continues running in the corner. 02 21 21 02 2021. 02 23. 42 minutes of black screen. Engine noise audible the entire time. Steady RPM. No acceleration spikes. No braking sounds. No gravel crunch. Just consistent engine tone. At 03:43, the image returns. Instantly. Bright. Normal. White highway. Clear shoulder lines. Mile marker 243. Visible on the right. Exactly where Jensen found her. Alvarez is sitting motionless. Hands on wheel. Headlights on. Luis and I watched the footage 3 times. Then we drove to mile marker 243 ourselves. Broad shoulders. 8-foot clearance to tree line. Clear lay markers, we measured it. Nothing matched the narrow corridor shown on the video. When we returned, Luis said what I had been thinking. If that's real footage, the road physically changed. We sent a copy to our vehicle equipment vendor. They ran diagnostics. No evidence of digital manipulation. No corrupted file segments. No editing. The 42 minutes of black screen? They said it was possible the camera sensor temporarily failed, but they couldn't explain why engine audio continued perfectly without interruption. Or why the GPS overlay showed coordinates inconsistent with visible roadway. I didn't forward the footage to the state. I didn't document the lane compression. Officially, Alvarez experienced radio interference and temporary equipment malfunction. Unofficially, the road narrowed at exactly 2:17 a.m., and for 42 minutes the camera recorded nothing but darkness. But here's the detail that made this incident different from every story Alan Crowley told me. When we pulled maintenance logs for Highway 180 the next week, there was a note from the Department of Transportation. Dated the morning after Alvarez's incident, it reported abnormal shoulder erosion along a half-mile stretch near mile marker 2R4. They patched it within 2 days, but erosion doesn't happen in 46 minutes, and it doesn't match the exact visual compression seen on video, unless the road wasn't just appearing narrower. Maybe it was being used more than once, in ways we weren't seeing. And that's when I began to suspect something worse than distortion. Something that didn't just change space. After the dashcam review, I did something I probably should have done years earlier. I asked dispatch for data, not anecdotal stories, not isolated reports. Data. Evelyn Brooks has been our night dispatcher for 21 years. She's seen 3 sheriffs come and go. She knows patterns the way ranchers know weather shifts. If something repeats long enough, she notices. I asked her to pull every call log between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. going back 10 years. Not just officer activity, public 911 calls. It took her 2 days to compile. When she brought the printouts into my office, she didn't look surprised. She looked confirmed. We started with simple volume, from midnight to 2015 a.m. Call frequency tapered gradually, exactly how you'd expect. Traffic stops, domestic disturbances, occasional wildlife collisions, normal rural patterns. Between 2017 a.m. and 3003 a.m., almost nothing. Not reduced. Absent. Across 10 years of logs, there were entire months where not a single 911 call originated during that 46-minute window. Statistically, that doesn't make sense. Even in a sparsely populated county, emergencies don't respect clock precision. Drunk drivers don't wait for round numbers. Wildlife doesn't schedule collisions. Yet the silence began at 2017. Not 2017. Not 2017. And it ended at 3030. 2017. And it ended at 333. Not 333,003. Recheck for reporting bias. Maybe calls came in but were logged slightly earlier or later. No. The timestamps were consistent. What little activity did appear during the window had a pattern. Unfounded. Unable to locate. False alarm. And those reports carried similar notes. Color confusion about location, deputies unable to find landmarks described, GPS inconsistencies. Evelyn pointed to one entry from 2012. Caller reported vehicle breakdown on Forest Road 418 at 2024 a.m. Deputy responded after 3003. Upon arrival, no vehicle. Caller unreachable afterward. Another from 2015. Noise complaint. Cabin near Lake Mary. Caller described hearing repeated engine sounds outside their property. Deputy responded at 3005. No vehicles in vicinity, no tire tracks. No activity. There were dozens like that. Not dramatic. Just unresolved. I asked Evelyn something I'd avoided asking directly. Have you ever taken a call during that window and felt like the caller wasn't in the same version of the county we were? She didn't hesitate. Yes, she told me about a call from 2017 she'd never documented beyond standard logging. At 2:29 a.m., a man reported hitting a deer near mile marker 238. He sounded shaken but coherent, gave clear coordinates. She kept him on the line while dispatching a deputy, before the patrol restriction policy had been strictly enforced. The deputy drove to the location. Nothing. No deer, no debris, no vehicle. Meanwhile, the caller stayed on the phone describing trees and a curve in the road. Evelyn checked Google Maps satellite view while they talked. The location he described didn't match mile marker 238. It matched mile marker 238. It matched mile marker 250, 12 miles north. But he insisted he hadn't moved. When she told him the responding unit couldn't find him, his voice changed. He said, "I can see the cruiser lights." The deputy wasn't within 5 miles of that area. At 2:41 a.m., the call dropped. The number later returned, not in service. We checked cell provider records back then. The call had registered, but the originating tower ping was inconsistent. It showed bouncing signals between two towers 20 miles apart. Simultaneously, Evelyn said she stopped dispatching units during the window after that. Not because of policy, because it felt pointless. If the caller and the deputy weren't operating in the same map, what was the response supposed to accomplish? I asked her if she'd noticed anything else. She nodded. Radio traffic changes. How? It sounds thinner, she said. Like there's less space between transmissions. That sounds vague, but if you've worked long enough with analog and digital systems, you know that tone shifts happen. At exactly 2:20:17, radio chatter always seemed slightly compressed. Not distorted, compressed, as if signals were sharing bandwidth with something else. We pulled radio frequency logs. Signal strength remained stable. No measurable interference spikes. Yet the audio artifacts existed in archived recordings. Subtle, but consistent. Then there was something even stranger. Evelyn showed me a heat map she'd built on her own time. She plotted every unable to locate report over the last decade. The majority clustered along 3 roadways: Highway 180, Forest Road 418, and County Road 555, all intersecting within a 12-mile triangle north of Flagstaff. All roads Alvarez had driven, all roads where shoulder erosion had recently been reported. And here's what unsettled me most. The clustering wasn't random across years. It was increasing. Between 2010 and 2015, there were 7 unresolved incidents during the window. Between 2016 and 2020, there were 19. From 2021 to present, 32. The frequency was rising, not dramatically, but steadily, like something testing boundaries. I asked Evelyn one last question before she left my office. If we ignored the policy and ran full patrol during that window for a week, what do you think would happen? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said something I still think about. "I don't think the calls would increase," she said. "I think we would." That night, I drove out to the Triangle intersection myself at 1:40 a.m., not to enter the window, just to sit near it. The forest was quiet, too quiet. And at 2:16 a.m., the wind stopped, not gradually, instantly. Instantly. At 2017, my patrol radio emitted a brief click. No transmission, just a click. And in that silence, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. Maybe the county wasn't silent between 2017 and 333. Maybe we just couldn't hear what was happening. And maybe whatever was happening was using the roads. The first time someone outside our department experienced it firsthand, it wasn't one of my deputies. It was a state trooper. His name was Eric Halverson, Arizona Department of Public Safety. 12 years on the job. Clean record, solid reputation. And he had no idea about 2017. That was my mistake. See, our patrol gap wasn't public knowledge. We didn't file it as a formal operational suspension. It was simply shift transition optimization on paper. State agencies assumed we maintained standard overnight coverage like every other county, which meant when Trooper Halverson was assigned highway enforcement along 188 that week, no one thought to warn him. On March 3rd, at 2009 a.m., he radioed dispatch that he was beginning a northbound traffic sweep from mile marker 231. At 2:13, he pulled over a speeding vehicle. At 2015, he cleared the stop. No citation, just a warning. At 2016, he began moving again. And at 2:16, our dispatch console lit up. Not from him. From DPS dispatch in Phoenix. They were attempting to reach Halverson. No response. His cruiser's GPS went active on our shared interagency map. It showed him at mile marker 2004 vol. Then 235, then 235, then 235. In less than 4 minutes. No corresponding speed increase. His speed telemetry never exceeded 64 miles per hour, which means covering 6 miles in under 4 minutes was impossible. At 2:21 a.m., his GPS froze. Location, Forest Service Road 418, the same road Alvarez had been near. But Halverson had been on Highway 180. There are no turns between 2004 and 240 that lead directly to 418 without at least 2 clear intersections. We reviewed traffic camera feeds. No footage showed his vehicle turning. At 2:24 a.m., DPS dispatch contacted us directly. They said Halverson's last transmission had been mid-sentence. He had just started saying something about lane visibility, the operator told us. Then it cut. Lane visibility. That phrase again. By 2:30 a.m., DPS was preparing to deploy additional units. I called Phoenix directly. I asked one question. What time is it on your end? 02:30, they said. Wait until 3:30, they said. Wait until 3:33 before sending anyone into that area. There was silence on the line. Sheriff, we have an officer missing. I understand. Wait. They didn't like it, but they trusted our local jurisdiction call. At 2:37 a.m., Halverson's cruiser dashcam went live on DPS cloud storage, which shouldn't have happened. Their system uploads only when reconnecting to cell network. Yet somehow, footage began streaming in real time. We watched it in my office. The camera showed Highway 188. Normal at first, then the same narrowing, same compression. Lane markers creeping inward, tree line appearing closer. Halverson's voice was audible. Dispatch, the shoulder's wrong. At 2018 on the footage timestamp, he said. It feels tighter. At 2019, he laughed once. Not nervous. Disbelieving. Is there construction I don't know about? No answer. Then something different happened. At 2:08, his dashboard compass began spinning, north to east to south to west in rapid sequence. But the road ahead remained straight. At 2:21, his headlights flickered, not dimmed, flickered sideways, as if casting shadows from objects not visible on camera. At 2:22, he said quietly, "There's another set of lights." Louis paused the video. "There aren't," he said. "No headlights visible behind or ahead." But Halverson continued. "They're pacing me." His speed remained 61 miles per hour. At 2:23, the dashcam caught something Alvarez's didn't. For 2 seconds, faint headlights appear in the left shoulder, parallel to him. Too low to be a truck. Too steady to be reflection. Then gone. At 2:24, the video froze. Audio continued. Engine steady. Then Halverson said something that changed how I viewed all of this. He said, "It's overlapping." We replayed that line 3 times. Overlapping. At 3:03 a.m., the video snapped back. Wide highway. Clear shoulders. Mile marker 243. Same location Alvarez had ended. Halverson's cruiser was found parked on the northbound shoulder at 3,118 a.m. Engine running. Driver door open. He was standing 20 feet away, looking at the forest. When approached, he asked the responding DPS unit a single question. Did you see the second highway? They hadn't. He insisted there had been another roadway running parallel to 180. Same direction, same speed, but slightly misaligned, like two transparent roads occupying the same space. He said for a moment he could see vehicles on it. Not clearly, but shapes, headlights, movement. He said he never turned off Highway 188, never left pavement, yet his GPS data showed 14 miles of eastward deviation. Just like Alvarez, when I met with him the next day, he was steady, but angry. Not at us. At the lack of explanation. Sheriff, he said, if that's fatigue, I need to know. If it's interference, I need to know. But don't tell me it was nothing. I didn't tell him it was nothing. I told him about the window. He stared at me. You're saying you knew? Yes. And you didn't notify State Patrol? We don't document it. He exhaled slowly. Then whatever's happening isn't local. That comment stuck with me, because if DPS cruisers were experiencing the same compression, the same overlapping imagery, then this wasn't a county issue. This was a corridor issue. And maybe not just Highway 188, maybe every road intersecting that 12-mile triangle. That night I checked something I hadn't checked before. Satellite imagery timestamps. Between 2017 and 3003 over the last year. There were gaps. Entire strips of imagery missing. Classified as signal obstruction. Across the same corridor. Which meant whatever was overlapping the highway might not just be visible from ground level. And that raised a question I hadn't wanted to ask. If there's another version of the road running parallel to ours, who's driving on it? After the state trooper incident, I stopped treating this like an isolated operational anomaly. If two independent agencies were experiencing the same spatial compression on the same stretch of highway, same timestamps, same visual distortion, then we weren't dealing with faulty equipment. We were dealing with something structural, so I called someone who doesn't scare easily. Henry Caldwell, county surveyor. 30 years mapping land parcels, boundary disputes, topographic shifts. He knows every contour line in that region better than most people know their own neighborhoods. I didn't tell him everything. I told him we needed to re-verify survey markers along Highway 188 and Forest Road 418. Specifically, the 12-mile triangle Evelyn had mapped. He agreed. We went out at noon. Bright sun, clear sky, normal conditions. Survey markers in this county are precise, metal pins embedded into ground at exact intervals. Some of them haven't moved in decades. Henry set up his total station equipment and began taking readings. Within the first mile, he frowned. Something's off. I asked what? The distance between markers, 2R44A and 2R44B, is short. How short? By about 8 inches. That doesn't sound dramatic. 8 inches over half a mile could be measurement tolerance. Except these markers were set with less than 1 inch variance. We remeasured. Same result. 8 inches short. We moved another mile north. This time the spacing was long, 12 inches long. Inconsistent expansion and contraction. Alternating. Like the roadway had been slightly stretched in sections and compressed in others. Henry recalibrated equipment twice. Same readings. He started checking his baseline reference against a marker outside the triangle. Perfect alignment. Inside the triangle, drift. Subtle, but measurable. Over 12 miles, the cumulative discrepancy added up to almost 3 feet. 3 feet of spatial deviation that didn't match any recorded construction, seismic activity, or erosion event. Henry asked if there had been recent road work. I told him about the shoulder erosion report. He shook his head. Erosion doesn't move embedded steel pins, he said. Then he asked something that caught my attention. When did this start? Why? These markers were verified 5 years ago. They matched then. That aligned with Evelyn's heat map increase. Rising frequency. Gradual intensification. We continued surveying until late afternoon. In total, we identified 27 markers with measurable displacement within the triangle. None outside it. And here's what unsettled me most. The displacements weren't random. They formed a pattern. Every deviation leaned slightly toward the center of the triangle, like the land itself was being pulled inward, not dramatically, not visibly, but incrementally. That night I compared Henry's survey notes with the dashcam compression footage. The sections where the road visually narrowed at 2017 matched the areas where survey markers showed inward displacement, which meant something wasn't just visually compressing, something was physically shifting, at least temporarily, and maybe repeatedly. Luis suggested checking geological activity. We contacted the state geologist quietly. Minor tectonic activity in northern Arizona exists, but nothing significant had been recorded in that region. No tremors. No subsidence. No sinkholes. So what causes alternating expansion and contraction across a 12-mile stretch without leaving visible cracks? Repetition. That word kept returning. If something were traveling that corridor repeatedly, over and over, within a compressed time window, could microstrain accumulate? Could the land record use without visible damage? I didn't like the direction that logic was taking, so I checked something else. Vehicle telemetry. We pulled data from department cruisers assigned to late shift over the past 5 years. Mileage logs versus GPS route data. Most matched, but in 14 instances, odometer readings were slightly higher than mapped routes, by fractions. Half a mile here, 0.2 miles there. Nothing that would raise red flags individually, but consistent within the triangle, as if vehicles had traveled slightly more distance than recorded routes suggested. Or traveled the same route more than once within a single pass. The most recent example? Trooper Halverson's cruiser. His odometer logged 18, 6 miles from traffic stop to mile marker 243. The mapped distance is 15, 1. That's a 3-5-mile difference. He insists he never deviated. The dashcam shows no turns. So where did the extra distance come from? If the road compressed visually but stretched physically, if a second highway overlapped slightly misaligned, if survey markers drifted inward over time, then maybe the vehicles weren't leaving the road. Maybe they were sharing it, sharing space with something slightly offset, another version, another repetition. And if that repetition happens every night between 2017 and 333, then over years the land would record it. Tiny shifts, incremental strain, as if 2 highways were occupying the same ground repeatedly for 46 minutes at a time. Henry called me 2 days later. He'd run historical survey comparisons. The displacement pattern began approximately 9 years ago. That's the year we quietly tightened enforcement of the 2017 window. Which means before that, more vehicles may have been driving during it. More overlap. More strain. And that raises a possibility I don't like. What if the window isn't expanding randomly? What if it's reacting to use? If the road is being shared by 2 versions of travel, ours and something else's, then increased overlap could intensify compression. And if state agencies deploy monitoring equipment into that triangle during 2017, if they increase presence, if they put more vehicles into that corridor at that time, then whatever is overlapping may become stronger, more defined, more physical. That night, I stood at mile marker 244 at 1:58 a.m. Survey flags still marking slight displacement. At 2016, the forest went still again. At 2017, my patrol headlights seemed to stop shorter than usual. Not dim. Shorter. And for just a second, I had the distinct feeling that my cruiser wasn't alone on that pavement. Even though the highway was empty, Because if the land is shifting, if the markers are drifting, then maybe we're not just driving through compression. Maybe we're intersecting something that drives through us. And that's when the thought finally formed clearly. If there's another road overlapping ours, it has its own traffic, and it might not know we're here either. Up until that point, every confirmed incident involved law enforcement, deputies, a state trooper, government vehicles with calibrated equipment and synchronized clocks. It would have been easier if it had stayed that way, because civilians can be dismissed. Fatigue, distraction, faulty memory. But the first civilian who came forward with something we couldn't ignore wasn't confused. He was precise. His name was Thomas Grady, 58, retired engineer from Colorado. He and his wife were driving south through Coconino County after visiting the Grand Canyon. He walked into the station at 11:30 in the morning on June 14th, calm, measured, not alarmed, just unsettled. He asked to speak with whoever was in charge of highway enforcement. That was me. He sat down across from my desk and said, "Sheriff, I think I drove through something last night." Those were his exact words. He explained that he and his wife had left Page at 1:40 a.m. to avoid traffic and heat. They were heading toward Flagstaff on Highway 180. At 2:12 a.m., they passed mile marker 2139. He remembered because he tracks mileage manually during road trips. At 2016 a.m., he said the pavement ahead began to look compressed, not cracked, not warped, compressed, like the dashed yellow lines were closer together. I didn't interrupt him. He continued. At 2:17, he said, the second road appeared. My stomach tightened. I asked him to clarify. He described it like this. It wasn't a new road. It was the same road, but slightly to the left, maybe 6 inches off alignment, like 2 transparent overlays that didn't perfectly match. His wife, seated beside him, nodded. They both saw it. 2 sets of lane markers, 2 shoulders, 2 tree lines, 1 faint, 1 solid. Thomas said for a few seconds both roads were visible at once. Then the solid one faded, and they were driving on the faint one. He knew this because the reflectors looked dimmer, and the forest felt closer. Exactly like Alvarez described. He glanced at the dashboard clock, 2017. He said the vehicle felt normal, steering steady, no loss of control. But the world outside felt slightly misaligned, like driving inside a projection that didn't fully match the frame. His wife asked him if there was construction. He said no. Then something happened neither of them expected. Headlights appeared ahead, not behind, ahead, facing them, on what should have been an empty northbound lane. But they weren't in the northbound lane. They were southbound. The headlights were coming toward them on the overlapping road. Thomas swerved instinctively. The headlights swerved too, but neither vehicle crossed into the other's physical path, because they weren't sharing the same exact lane. They were sharing the same space. 2 roads, offset slightly. 2 vehicles, passing without collision. He said as they crossed, he saw the other driver clearly for half a second. A man, in a patrol uniform. But not Arizona DPS, not Coconino County, different patch. He couldn't identify it. The vehicle didn't look like a modern cruiser either. Boxier. Older model. The moment they passed, the faint road snapped back into alignment with the solid one. Single lane markers again. Wide shoulders. Normal forest spacing. Dashboard clock read 3000/3. Thomas checked his watch. It read 2018. 1 minute had passed for him. 46 minutes had passed on the dashboard clock. His wife confirmed it. Her phone read 2018. The vehicle clock read 3003. They drove the rest of the way without incident. By the time they reached Flagstaff, both clocks had synchronized again. No explanation. No warning. Just alignment. He said he didn't sleep that night. He replayed it over and over. He worked in engineering for 30 years. He understands measurement error. He understands perspective illusions. This wasn't that. I think, he said quietly, we were driving on two timelines at once. I asked him something specific. When you saw the other patrol vehicle, did it look like it could see you? He hesitated, then said, yes. That answer unsettled me more than anything Alvarez or Halverson reported, because deputies had seen faint headlights, but this was the first time someone described mutual awareness. Two drivers, two roads, seeing each other. I asked if he'd be willing to make a formal statement. He agreed, but requested we not publicly release it. He didn't want attention. He wanted confirmation. He wanted to know if it was happening to others. I didn't give him details. I just told him he wasn't alone. After he left, I pulled up archived patrol unit inventories from the late 1990s. We used older box-style cruisers back then. Different paint scheme, different patch design. And here's the detail that stopped me cold. In 1998, a deputy named Marcus Whitlow was reported missing during a late-night patrol on Highway 188. Last radio transmission timestamp 2001 a.m. Vehicle never found. Search concluded after 3 weeks. Official cause, presumed accident off-road. No wreckage ever recovered. I pulled his unit number. Unit 12. The same call sign Alvarez used when her radio cut at 2017. We reassigned that number years ago without thinking about it. Now I'm not sure that was coincidence, because if Thomas Grady saw a patrol vehicle from another timeline, and if the other driver saw him, then maybe the overlap isn't random. Maybe it's synchronized. Maybe every night between 2:17 and 3:33, two versions of Highway 188 exist, one from here, one from somewhere adjacent, and sometimes the drivers look up at the exact same moment, which means the next question isn't just who's driving over there, it's how many of them never made it back to this side. After Thomas Grady left my office, I didn't go home. I went downstairs to records. If there was even a possibility that a missing deputy from 1998 had been seen on an overlapping version of Highway 188, I needed more than a coincidence of unit numbers. Marcus Whitlow, age 34 at disappearance, 7 years on the force. Last shift began at 6:00 p.m. Last confirmed radio transmission logged at 2019 a.m. Location, Highway 188 near mile marker 241. That alone made my throat tighten. 241 sits directly inside the 12-mile triangle. Back in '98, our systems were mostly analog. Radio logs were written manually and archived on microfilm. We had the records scanned years later, but most people never look at those files. I did. At 2:16 a.m., Whitlow radio dispatch reporting routine patrol, no incidents. At 2:77 a.m., dispatch logged static interference. At 2:19 a.m., partial transmission recorded, lanes are. Then nothing. The handwritten note next to it reads, signal loss. Search began at 3:05 a.m. His cruiser was never found. No debris, no skid marks, no tire tracks leaving the road. The official explanation at the time was possible vehicle departure into forested ravine. Except that stretch of highway has no ravines within 5 miles. I cross-referenced the search map from 1998 with Henry's modern survey displacement pattern. The center of the search grid, exactly where survey markers show the strongest inward drift. I sat back and stared at that for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done yet. I checked radio archives. Even analog systems record carrier signals, the empty transmission bursts when someone keys a mic but doesn't speak. We digitized those archives in 2008 for compliance reasons. Hardly anyone ever reviews them. I filtered every radio transmission between 2017 and 3007T and 303 over the last 15 years. Most were static, some were silence, but 3 times? 3. The system recorded a brief carrier burst from a unit ID that shouldn't exist. Unit 12. We hadn't used Unit 12 between 1999 and 2012. It was retired after Whitlow's disappearance. Yet on March 17, 2006, at 2:23 a.m., there's a 2-second carrier signal labeled Unit 12. No voice, just open mic. Again in 2009. Again in 2009. Again in 2009. Each one time-stamped inside the window. Each one unacknowledged at the time. Dispatch logs from those nights list brief interference. No one thought twice. I brought Louis into my office and played the audio. It's faint, but if you enhance it, you can hear engine noise. Same low idle pattern. Consistent RPM, like a cruiser stopped but running. Louis didn't say anything for a long time. Finally he asked, "Are we hearing a unit that doesn't exist?" I didn't answer, because if we were, that meant something far more complicated than spatial overlap. It meant communication overlap. If the two roads coexist for 46 minutes, if vehicles share space but remain slightly offset, then radio frequencies might overlap too. And if Marcus Whitlow is still driving somewhere between 2017 and 3000 CT every night, he might still be keying his mic. The next thing I checked was equipment serial numbers. In 1998, Whitlow's cruiser was equipped with a Motorola Spectra analog radio. Those radios transmitted on specific frequency bands that we phased out in 2005. Yet the 2006 and 2009 carrier bursts registered on the legacy band, not the new digital channel. Which means whatever key that mic wasn't using our current system, it was using the old one. The one Whitlow would have had. I don't scare easily. I've worked homicide scenes. I've notified families. But sitting in that quiet office listening to a ghosted carrier signal from a decommissioned unit, that's different. Because that's not folklore. That's infrastructure. That's physics interacting with something we don't understand. At 1:50 a.m. that night, I drove back to mile marker 241, not to enter the window, just to sit near it. I parked on the shoulder and turned off my headlights. Forest still, sky clear. At 2016, I switched my patrol radio to the legacy analog frequency. No one uses it anymore. At 2017, static bloomed, not loud, but thick, layered, like overlapping voices too faint to separate. At 2019, I keyed my mic. Unit 12, this is Sheriff Mercer. Do you copy? Silence. Then at 2:20, a carrier burst. 2 seconds. No voice. Just open mic. Engine idle. Audible. My heart rate spiked harder than I'd like to admit. I tried again. Unit 12, identify. Static. And then something else. For half a second, beneath the interference, I thought I heard a word. Narrow. Then it cut. At 3:33, the static vanished. Clean airwaves. Dead silence. I sat there another 10 minutes. Nothing. When I returned to the station, I didn't log the exchange. I didn't tell DPS. I didn't tell the state geologist. Because how do you document a conversation with a unit that disappeared 25 years ago? But I couldn't ignore one possibility anymore. If Whitlow's cruiser never crashed, if it never left the highway, if it entered the window at 2:17 and never fully exited, then he may not be missing in the way we think. He may be driving the overlapping road every night, between 2017 and 33. And if Thomas Grady saw him, if headlights crossed between layers, then the separation isn't absolute. It's porous, which means one day the alignment might be perfect, not slightly offset, not 6 inches apart, perfect. And if that happens, two roads won't pass through each other harmlessly. They'll collide. And I don't know which version survives. Up until July, the pattern had been rigid. 2017 AM, not 2016, not 2018. Everything started at 2017 and ended at 3003. That precision was the only thing giving us a sense of control. A defined boundary. A measurable edge. Then the boundary moved. It was July 22nd. Monsoon season. High humidity but clear sky that night. Deputy Mark Jensen was covering the northern stretch of Highway 180, same corridor, same triangle. His shift ended at 2:30 a.m. He had already begun heading back toward town, planning to park near mile marker 238 and wait out the final minutes before 2:38:17 just to be safe. At 2012 a.m., he radioed in routine status. At 2014, he reported light crosswind but normal visibility. At 2015, he said something I still replay in my head. Dispatch, the lane markers look faint. Faint, not compressed. Not closer. Faint. Evelyn confirmed road conditions were dry and visibility clear from highway cameras. At 2016, Jensen slowed from 58 miles per hour to 42. Feels tighter, he said. That phrase again. Feels tighter. I was in the station reviewing paperwork when I heard the transmission. My eyes went straight to the wall clock. 2016:38. The window hadn't started yet. At 2:16:51, Jensen's radio crackled. Static, not total loss, but layered interference. And the forest outside the station windows did something I hadn't seen before. The trees leaned, not visibly bending like wind, but the shadows shifted sideways, as if light sources had moved. I stepped outside. There was no wind, not even a breeze. At 2016:59, Jensen said quietly, "It's early." That's what he said. He had memorized the window. We all had. And he knew it was early. At 2017, the digital clock ticked over, but whatever was happening had already begun. His dashcam later confirmed it. At 2016:42, the lane markers began narrowing. At 2016:47, the shoulder visually compressed. At 2016:5-3, faint duplicate lane lines appeared offset by inches. The second highway, 7 seconds before the window officially opened. Jensen kept driving. He shouldn't have. But he later told me something important. It felt like it was pulling me forward, not accelerating, not physically dragging, but like stopping wasn't an option. At 2:17:09, he reported seeing headlights in the northbound lane. Again, no vehicles present according to traffic cameras. At 2:17:15, he said, "They're closer than they should be." At 2:17:22, his GPS showed sudden eastward drift, same as Alvarez, same as Halverson. But this time, the displacement was greater. 22 miles east, in less than 10 seconds. Impossible geography. Then something new happened. At 2:17:40, dispatch received a 911 call. That had never happened before. The window was silent. Always silent. But this time, a call came in at 2:17:40 exactly. Caller ID blocked. Male voice. Breathing hard. "He's in my lane." Evelyn tried to get location, the caller said. Highway 180, southbound, which is exactly where Jensen was. She asked for mile marker. The caller said 240. Jensen was approaching 240. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Evelyn asked what kind of vehicle he saw. The caller paused, then said, "Patrol unit." Jensen was driving a marked cruiser. Evelyn muted the call and looked at me. We both knew what this meant. The overlap wasn't just visual anymore. Two drivers were reporting each other simultaneously. At 2018:02, Jensen shouted, "He's not braking." On the 911 line, the caller yelled, "He's not moving." Both describing the same moment. Headlights converging. But in reality, there was no physical vehicle on Jensen's dashcam. Just the faint second set of headlights. Then at 2014, the audio cut. From both lines. Jensen's dashcam froze. The 911 call dropped. The number returned unassigned. We waited, because he was still inside the window. At 3003, everything snapped back. Highway wide, clear, normal. Jensen's cruiser was found stopped sideways across both lanes near mile marker 240. Engine stalled, airbags deployed, but there was no collision damage, no impact point, no debris, no skid marks. Yet the front bumper was slightly dented inward, like it had struck something soft but resistant. Jensen was conscious, dazed. He kept repeating one sentence. He was real. We checked the patrol car for damage alignment. The dent matched nothing in our environment. No tree bark, no guardrail height, no animal strike pattern, just a shallow inward depression, as if the vehicle had impacted a surface that wasn't fully solid. The most disturbing detail came from the 911 system logs. The call duration was 34 seconds, but the server timestamp showed 46 minutes had elapsed during that call. 46, the exact length of the window. Even though the caller spoke for less than a minute, time stretched inside the system, just like it stretches on the road. And here's the part that changed everything. The 901 recording, when enhanced, contains faint secondary audio. Another dispatcher's voice. Not Evelyn. Not anyone in our department. A woman's voice saying, Unit 12, confirm status. Which means on the other side, there is a dispatch center too. And if that's true, then every night at 2:17, 2 counties overlap. 2 patrol units drive the same corridor. 2 dispatchers answer the same calls. And for 46 minutes, both think the other one is the anomaly. The window didn't just open early, it synchronized. And if synchronization increases, eventually the offset disappears. And next time there won't be a faint impact. There will be a real one. And I don't know which department will file the report. After Jensen's near collision, I couldn't keep this contained inside county lines anymore. The state was already preparing an environmental study based on Mark Holloway's data review. Now I had something worse, simultaneous 911 overlap and physical vehicle damage. So I authorized limited cooperation, not full disclosure, but enough to justify instrumentation. Within 2 weeks, the Arizona Department of Public Safety deployed monitoring equipment along the 12-mile triangle. 3 sensor stations, each equipped to record GPS signal integrity, electromagnetic fluctuations, atmospheric pressure changes, temperature gradients, seismic micro-movement, radio frequency spectrum analysis. They positioned one near mile marker 238, one at 244, and one at the Forest Road 418 junction. The idea was simple. If something environmental was causing the compression, we'd catch it. Solar interference, magnetic disturbance, underground activity, something measurable. The first test night was August 3rd. No patrol units were scheduled inside the window. No civilian traffic was expected. We quietly diverted late-night flow with minor detours for maintenance. At 2014 a.m., the equipment showed baseline readings, stable. At 2016 a.m., atmospheric pressure dropped slightly. Not dramatic, but measurable. 0.3 millibars in under 10 seconds. That's not typical for still conditions. At 2/7/1652, GPS signal noise spiked across all 3 stations simultaneously. Not loss, noise, as if 2 coordinate streams were overlapping. At 2017-0, all 3 seismic monitors registered micro vibrations, not tremors. Not ground shaking, but rhythmic pulses, almost like distant traffic. But there was no traffic. The vibration pattern lasted exactly 46 seconds, then stopped, then resumed again at 2018 10,000, 46 seconds on, 46 seconds off. Like waves, overlapping waves. Then something happened we didn't expect. The electromagnetic sensors showed dual peaks on identical frequencies. Same frequency band, same amplitude, but slightly phase shifted, like 2 identical signals out of sync by a fraction of a second. The state technician monitoring remotely called me at Tallinn 19. Sheriff, are you running additional equipment we're not aware of? No. because we're detecting mirrored RF signatures. Mirrored. That word again. At 2:20, camera feeds from the roadside stations flickered, not blacking out, overlaying. For brief moments, each frame showed ghosted double imagery of the same highway. 2 sets of lane markers. 2 shoulders. Exactly what Alvarez and Jensen described. But here's the critical detail. The cameras recorded it. The footage exists. Which means this isn't subjective perception. This isn't human error. The environment itself is duplicating. At 2:22, Station 2's temperature sensor registered a sudden 4-degree drop localized to the shoulder area only. Pavement temperature remained constant. Air temperature above 10 feet remained constant. Air temperature above 10 feet remained constant. Just the lower 3-foot band cooled, as if something colder occupied the space closest to the road. Then at 2024, all 3 stations recorded synchronized GPS coordinate drift. The physical hardware did not move, yet their logged coordinates shifted 18 feet east, then returned, repeated every 90 seconds until 3003. The technician on the phone went quiet. "Sheriff, this isn't interference." "I know." At 2:27, something else happened. Station 1's audio sensor, a simple ambient microphone, picked up engine noise, continuous, low RPM, but no vehicles were present. We verified through traffic cameras miles out, nothing on the highway. Yet the audio waveform showed multiple engines, 3 distinct RPM patterns overlapping. I asked the technician to isolate them. He did. One matched Jensen's cruiser idle pattern from previous nights. The other 2, unknown. At 2:31, the RF spectrum analyzer registered a brief carrier signal on the legacy analog frequency band, Unit 12's frequency. No one in our department was transmitting. At 2:33, the seismic pulses intensified. The amplitude increased by 12%, then dropped, then increased again. 46-second cycles, on and off, like synchronized traffic lights between 2 realities. At 2:45, Station 3's video feed froze for exactly 46 seconds. When it resumed, the shoulder looked slightly narrower, then widened again. The footage shows physical fluctuation, not optical illusion. At 3004, every anomaly stopped simultaneously. Atmospheric pressure stabilized. GPS noise ceased. Seismic pulses ended. RF duplication disappeared. Temperature normalized. Clean data. As if nothing had happened. The state technician called back at 3006. His voice was careful. "Sheriff, we can't classify this. Try. It's like 2 identical environmental profiles occupying the same coordinates, slightly out of phase." Out of phase. That's physics language. 2 waves overlapping but not perfectly aligned. I asked him something specific. If the phase alignment corrected fully, what would happen? Silence. Then he said, "Energy convergence. Define that." 2 systems occupying identical space at identical phase would not remain separate, which means collision, not vehicle to vehicle, system to system. After the equipment was packed up the next day, the state report labeled the findings as unexplained, localized environmental interference requiring further study. That's bureaucratic language for "we don't know." But I know this much now: the overlap isn't imagination. It isn't equipment malfunction. It's measurable. And it's cycling. 46 seconds on, 46 seconds on, 46 seconds off, inside a 46-minute window. That's too precise to be random. Which means the next logical question isn't why it's happening. It's what determines the cycle. Because if that cycle shifts, if the pulses lengthen, if the on phase holds longer than the off phase, then one night, the overlap won't flicker. It will lock. And when it does, 2 highways won't pass through each other. They'll occupy the same phase, and that won't be a shallow dent in a bumper. That will be something neither side survives. And the worst part? If that happens at 2017, both departments will respond to 3003, and neither will find what they're looking for. After the state sensors confirmed what we already suspected, that something measurable was overlapping our corridor, I tightened the policy. No patrol within 5 miles of the triangle after 2:10 a.m., not even parked units. Dispatch was instructed to delay non-life-threatening calls until 3003 without exception. We weren't going to stress the phase alignment any further. For 2 weeks, it stayed quiet. No anomalies. No ghosted headlights. No early window openings. And then Deputy Alvarez requested to rotate back onto late shift. I hesitated. She insisted she was fine. Cleared medically. No lingering symptoms. She said avoiding the corridor felt like giving it power. I approved her return, but kept her outside the triangle. On September 2nd, she was assigned Southern Patrol, well outside the 12-mile zone. At 1:52 a.m., she radioed routine traffic stop. At 2004, she cleared it. At 2008, she began heading toward Highway 89A, a completely different corridor. At 2012, she reported something I hadn't expected. Dispatch, my clock's ahead. Evelyn asked her to clarify. My dash clock says 2:25. Dispatch clock 2:12. We assumed electrical glitch. Vehicle clocks drift. But Alvarez sounded unsettled. It just jumped, she said. It didn't roll forward. At 2:13, her radio signal thinned. Not full static, just compression. Exactly like the triangle interference. Except she was 14 miles south of it. At 2014, she said quietly, "The trees look closer." My stomach tightened. The window hadn't started, and she wasn't in the zone. At 2:15, her GPS displayed eastward drift. Evelyn watched the map. Her cruiser icon shifted 9 miles toward the triangle, then snapped back, then shifted again. At 2:16, Alvarez slowed. "Road feels narrow," she said. The window still hadn't reached 2017. It was spreading. At 2016-40, her dashcam feed, streamed live to our system since the state deployment, showed faint duplicate lane lines, not as pronounced as before, but visible. At 2016-58, she said, "It's early again." At 2017, everything intensified. Her GPS drift jumped 22 miles east. Her speed telemetry stayed at 41 miles per hour. Her odometer ticked normally. At 2017-12, she went silent. Not radio loss. Not static. Just absence. Her cruiser icon remained on the map. Stationary. But the GPS coordinates began oscillating between 2 positions. One on Highway 89A, one inside the triangle, back and forth, every 46 seconds. On phase, off phase, exactly matching the sensor cycles from August. At 2018, Evelyn attempted contact. No response. I was already in my cruiser heading south. I shouldn't have been. But the window had moved. The boundary no longer held. At 2:20, Alvarez's dashcam went black. Engine audio continued. Then something different happened. Instead of 46 minutes of darkness, we got a flash. 3 seconds of visible roadway. Not 89A. Not Highway 188. Something else. Narrower. Unmarked. No reflectors. Dense forest crowding the shoulder. And another patrol cruiser directly ahead. Different paint scheme. Older body style. Unit number visible briefly. 12. Then black again. I felt my pulse in my ears. At 2:24, her radio keyed open. No voice. Just engine idle. And faintly, very faintly, another radio transmission underneath. A woman's voice. Unit 12, confirm position. Not Evelyn. At 2:27, the GPS oscillation slowed. Instead of every 46 seconds, It shifted every 30. Phase tightening. That's what the state technician had warned about. If the cycle shortens, the overlap strengthens. At 2:29, her vehicle icon stopped flickering. It remained inside the triangle, even though physically she was miles south. At 2:31, I reached her last physical location on 89A. Her cruiser was there, parked partially across the shoulder. Engine running, lights on. No damage, no debris. I approached cautiously. She was inside, hands on wheel, eyes open, breathing steady, same posture as before. I opened the door. Alvarez, no response. At 2:33, her radio crackled to life. Her voice came through clearly, but not from her cruiser speaker, from my own. Dispatch, I'm approaching mile marker 244. She was speaking from the overlapping feed, from inside the window. Evelyn responded instinctively. Unit 12, confirm. I looked at the patch on Alvarez's sleeve. Unit 14, not 12. At 2:35, Alvarez's physical body blinked, like someone waking from sleep. She turned toward me. What time is it? 2:35. Her dash clock read 2:35. Her dash clock read 2:30. She looked confused. I never left 2016, she said. We checked telemetry afterward. Her odometer showed she had traveled 8 miles between 2016 and 2031. But her cruiser never moved from the shoulder. Dashcam blacked out for 15 minutes, not 46. 15, which means the window had shortened for her. The phase had tightened. She described seeing the second highway again. But this time, she said it wasn't offset. It was aligned, same width, same markings, perfectly superimposed. She saw another cruiser directly ahead, Unit 12. She said the driver turned and looked at her, and she recognized him from old department photos. Marcus Whitlow. She said he looked confused, like he had just realized someone else could see him. Then she said something that chilled me. He told me to turn around. I asked how he told her. She said he didn't use the radio. He used his headlights, flashing twice, pause, twice again. The old signal code for hazard ahead. At 2016 in her perception, she slowed. At 2017 in ours, she vanished into overlap when she turned her steering wheel to avoid whatever Whitlow saw. That's when her physical cruiser stopped moving, and her consciousness continued on the other road. For 13 minutes, when she returned, only 15 minutes had passed for us. Which means the phase window isn't just shifting, it's compressing. If it compressing fully, if the 46-minute cycle becomes zero offset, then there won't be on and off. There will be only alignment. And next time two patrol units meet at mile marker 244, they won't pass through each other. They'll occupy the exact same coordinates, at the exact same phase. And that's not compression, that's replacement. After Alvarez lost those 13 minutes, I stopped thinking of this as a road problem. It wasn't about pavement anymore. It wasn't about lane width or GPS drift. It was about synchronization. The window had started early, then it expanded south. Then it shortened for Alvarez, which meant the phase wasn't stable. And if the phase wasn't stable, then neither side was fully separate anymore. 3 nights later, at 2010 a.m., I made a decision I'm not proud of. I switched our dispatch console to the legacy analog band 5 minutes before the window, not just to listen, to speak. Evelyn protested. Sheriff, we don't initiate, I know. But if overlap was tightening, then communication might too. If Unit 12 still keys his mic on the other side, then maybe we're not the only ones hearing interference. At 2016 a.m., static thickened. At 2017 exactly, it layered. Not white noise. Not digital hiss. Layered. like two radio rooms transmitting in the same space. I keyed the mic. This is Coconino County Sheriff's Office. Identify nothing. Then at 288, a carrier signal responded. 2 seconds. Then a woman's voice. Clear. Professional. Unit 12. Confirm your status. Evelyn's eyes widened. That wasn't her voice. It wasn't anyone in our department. I keyed again. Dispatch, identify your agency. Silence. Then faintly, beneath the static, Canyon District Sheriff's Office. I felt something inside my chest drop. There's no Canyon District Sheriff's Office in Arizona. There's no Canyon District in this region. Evelyn typed rapidly, searching municipal listings. Nothing. At 2001 teen, the voice came through again. Stronger this time. Unit 12, you are outside your assigned corridor. Return to 188. Alvarez froze in her chair. That was the same instruction Whitlow had given her with headlights. Turn around. Return. I pressed transmit. This is Sheriff Daniel Mercer. Identify your county. The pause that followed felt deliberate. Then the woman responded, Sheriff Mercer. The use of my name hit harder than static ever could. Yes. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, you are not authorized in this phase. Phase. Not time. Not hour. Phase. Evelyn mouthed the word without speaking. I kept my voice steady. Who are you? We managed the North Corridor between 2017 and 3003. That sentence was spoken calmly, like policy, like routine jurisdiction. I asked, how long? Since your side initiated deviation, that didn't make sense. When? 1998. Whitlow. The year he vanished. I felt my pulse in my throat. What deviation? There was a faint distortion like someone shuffling papers on the other side. Unit 12 crossed alignment during compression. Your department failed to withdraw. Withdraw. Like this was a boundary violation. I tried to keep control of the exchange. Where is Unit 12? He remains in service. Alvarez inhaled sharply. I pressed again. Does he know he's missing? The response was immediate. Missing. The word sounded genuinely confused. He is assigned to Highway 188. I looked at Evelyn. On their side, Whitlow never disappeared. He never left service. He never failed to return, which means on their timeline, he crossed into ours and never came back. At 2:22, the static thickened. The voice sharpened. Your recent activity is destabilizing overlap, state monitoring, patrol attempts, radio contact. We were increasing amplitude. You must reduce presence, she said, or alignment will finalize. Finalize. I didn't like that word. What happens if it finalizes? Silence. Then softer. Replacement. The same word that had been forming in my mind. I asked one final question. How many of ours are over there? Long pause. Then 4. 4. Whitlow in 1998. Who else? We've had 3 unexplained disappearances since 1998. All late-night patrol. All near the triangle. I swallowed. And how many of yours are here? The static deepened. Then, almost reluctantly, 3. 3. 3. That means somewhere in our county, free patrol units from Canyon District might have crossed into our phase at some point. But we never found them. Or maybe we did. Maybe we logged them as unfounded. Unidentified vehicles. Ghost headlights. False 911 calls. At 2:24, the seismic pulses resumed. I could feel it faintly through the floor. The voice spoke again. You are increasing amplitude with monitoring. They know about the state sensors, which means their side detects our equipment too. You must suspend interference. Interference. To them, we are the anomaly. The overlapping, the distortion. At 2:25, I made a decision. If we stop patrol completely during the window, will alignment stabilize? There was a long silence. Then reduced activity prolongs offset. Prolongs offset, meaning the more empty the road is, the less likely the phases fully merge. We've been doing the right thing accidentally. Avoiding patrol isn't superstition, it's containment. At 2:28, the voice softened. Sheriff Mercer. Yes, your Deputy Alvarez has partial alignment memory. My blood ran cold. She must not enter corridor again. That wasn't advice, it was warning. At 2:30, static spiked, then dropped. The channel went silent. At 3003, clean air. Evelyn leaned back slowly. That wasn't interference. No, that was a jurisdiction. And if they manage Highway 188 between 2017 and 3003, then we've been crossing into their patrol zone for 25 years. Unintentionally. And they've been crossing into ours. 3 of them still here. 4 of ours still there. If alignment finalizes, replacement happens. 4 for 4. Or 7 for 7. And we don't know which side becomes primary. Because if 2 counties occupy the same coordinates, only one version keeps the map. And I'm starting to think they believe it's theirs. After the radio exchange, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Because I was calculating. If reduced activity prolongs offset, as the other dispatch claimed, then the only rational response was total withdrawal. No patrol. No monitoring equipment. No vehicles within 10 miles of the triangle between 2 and 30 a.m. Complete silence. If this was a jurisdictional overlap between phases, then we would not contest it. We would not test it. We would not push alignment. The next night, I issued a directive. Temporary road maintenance closure. Highway 180 northbound traffic diverted at 1:45 a.m. Forest Road 4018 blocked for erosion mitigation. County Road 557 gated. On paper, it looked like routine infrastructure repair. In reality, we were clearing the corridor. At 2 a.m., the triangle was empty. No patrol units. No civilian vehicles. No state sensors. No radio transmissions. Evelyn powered down legacy frequencies. We left only passive recording. At 2016 a.m., the forest went still. I was parked at the station, not inside the zone. At 2:17, the static bloomed even without us transmitting. That alone told me something. The phase does not require our participation to activate. It is cyclical, autonomous. At 2018, traffic cameras covering the diverted stretch flickered, even though no vehicles were present. At 2019, seismic monitors, the few we left active outside the triangle, picked up faint pulses, lower amplitude than before, which suggests presence inside the corridor was reduced, but not gone. At 2:21, something happened we hadn't seen before. A 911 call came in, but not through our public line, through the administrative backline. Through the administrative backline, a number only internal agencies have. Caller ID, Canyon District Sheriff's Office. Evelyn looked at me. I nodded. She answered. Silence. Then the same woman's voice. Corridor is clear. Her tone was different this time. Not confrontational. Observational. Yes, Evelyn said carefully. Offset is stabilizing, the voice continued. Define stabilizing, I said, stepping close to the console. Phase separation increasing. That means distance between roads widening. The overlay pulling apart. At 2:23, the seismic pulses outside the triangle diminished further. At 2:24, atmospheric pressure returned to baseline faster than usual. It was working. Withdrawal reduced amplitude. But then something shifted. At 2027, a vehicle entered the corridor. Unplanned, unavoidable. A semi-truck driver ignored diversion signage and continued northbound on 188. We saw him on camera. No law enforcement present to intercept. He crossed mile marker 238 at 2028, right inside the window. Immediately, the sensors outside the zone spiked. Seismic amplitude increased by 30%. RF duplication reappeared. Atmospheric pressure dipped. The overlap responded to presence. On the administrative line, the woman's voice sharpened. Unauthorized entry. The semi's headlights flickered. Camera feed showed faint duplicate lane markers appearing beneath him. At 2:29, the truck slowed. At 2:30, his dash cam, we later obtained it, recorded double tree lines. At 2:31, he swerved slightly left, as if avoiding something. At 2:32, the truck's GPS pinged two locations simultaneously. One on Highway 180, one 3 miles east inside forest. At 2:33, the administrative line crackled again. Remove vehicle. We can't, I said. We have no units inside. Remove vehicle. Her tone was urgent now. At 2:34, the semi's trailer jerked violently on camera, no visible obstacle. But the rear wheels kicked sideways, like striking resistance. At 2:35, the truck's engine revved high. Then, cut. Lights remained on. Vehicle stopped dead center in lane. And then the overlap intensified. Lane markers duplicated fully. Tree lines shifted inward. The faint second highway aligned nearly perfectly with ours. For 6 seconds, the camera showed two fully superimposed roadways, not offset, aligned. The administrative line carried static and overlapping voices, more than one dispatcher, more than one radio feed. Then the woman said something I will not forget. Collision imminent. But there was no visible second vehicle. At 2:36, the semi's cab shuddered. Metal creaked. Glass spiderwebbed outward. But nothing struck it. No impact point. No debris. The windshield cracked from the center, as if pressure met pressure. At 2:37, the engine restarted on its own. The truck rolled forward 3 feet, then stopped again. At 2:38, the alignment flickered. Offset widened slightly. The pulses weakened. At 2039, the administrative line went dead. The window continued until 3033, but the intensity never reached that 6-second peak again. At 33.3, everything normalized. We dispatched units immediately. The semi-driver was conscious, shaken. He kept saying there was another truck. He described headlights directly in front of him. Matching speed. Matching position. He swore he felt impact, but there was no other vehicle. The front grille of his truck had a shallow indentation, not from guardrail, not from animal strike, like Jensen's bumper. We inspected the pavement. For the first time, there was visible damage. A faint line across the asphalt, running perpendicular to the lane, 6 inches wide, discolored, as if heat or friction had marked the surface briefly. Henry later measured it. The survey markers nearest that spot had shifted another 1/4 inch inward. One night, one unauthorized vehicle, and the corridor reacted violently, which confirms something critical. The overlap is not passive. It responds to traffic, to presence, to movement through its space. Withdrawal stabilizes offset. Entry destabilizes it. If that's true, then the only way to prevent alignment finalization is to treat the triangle like a border, not a road. And borders don't stay quiet forever, because if one side decides it doesn't want separation, then silence won't protect us. And the next time a vehicle ignores diversion signage, it won't just crack a windshield. It will choose a side. And one of those roads will remain. The other will be overwritten. After the semi-truck incident, I understood something clearly. This wasn't random physics. It wasn't a glitch in geography. It was a managed boundary. And boundaries don't just react, they test. For 3 nights after we cleared the corridor, we maintained total withdrawal. No vehicles, no equipment, no transmissions on legacy bands. The overlap intensity dropped. Seismic pulses reduced by half. RF duplication became faint. Atmospheric dips barely measurable. Offset widening. Just like the other dispatch had said, phase separation increasing. Which meant, for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were regaining control. That feeling lasted exactly 4 nights. On the 5th night, at 2:21 a.m., something crossed over. Not into their phase. Into ours. It didn't come from the northbound diversion point. It didn't appear on highway cameras entering from any feeder road. It simply existed. Traffic camera 3, positioned just south of mile marker 244, flickered at 2:21:14. When the image stabilized, there was a patrol vehicle parked on the shoulder. Old model. Boxier frame. Different paint scheme. Not Arizona DPS. Not Coconino County. Unit number visible on the side. 17. We have never had a Unit 17 assigned to patrol in this county. The vehicle headlights were on. Engine running. No driver visible through the windshield. Evelyn froze the frame. That's not ours. No, it wasn't. We rewound the camera feed. There was no approach, no entry, no headlights traveling into frame. At 2:20:58, the road was empty. At 2:21:14, the vehicle was there. Full stop. No arrival. Just presence. At 2:22, the administrative backline rang. We didn't answer immediately. It rang twice more. Then I picked up. The same woman's voice. We are returning one. The air in my office felt thin. Returning who? Unit 17. We don't have a Unit 17. Silence. Then, quietly, you did. I turned to Luis. We pulled missing personnel records. In 2007, Deputy Aaron Vale went missing during a winter patrol. Last known location, Forest Road 418. Last transmission timestamp, 2:23 a.m. Unit number 17. We retired that call sign after his disappearance. The other dispatch continued. Alignment error corrected. Corrected. Like a bookkeeping mistake. You have one of ours, she said. We do not. 3 of ours remain unaccounted. 3. She had said that before. 3 of theirs here. 4 of ours there. She was balancing. We are reducing discrepancy. At 2:23, the patrol vehicle on camera shifted slightly. Not rolling. Not steering. The metal itself seemed to waver. Like heat distortion. Then, the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. Uniform outdated by at least 15 years. He looked around slowly. Confused. Disoriented. But real. Solid. Not translucent. Not flickering. Solid. Luis whispered, "That's Vale." I recognized him from archive photographs. Older than he should have been. Or maybe exactly as old as he would be if he had continued aging somewhere else. He walked into the lane, looked north, looked south, then directly at the camera, like he knew we were watching. At 2:24, the administrative voice said, "Offset will not tolerate imbalance." "You're sending him back?" I asked. "Yes." "Why now?" "Phase tightening increases exchange probability." Exchange. They weren't just managing overlap. They were correcting drift. Every time the alignment intensified, something crossed. In 1998, Whitlow crossed and never returned. In 2007, Vale crossed. Now they were sending Vale back. But Whitlow, they kept him. I asked the question anyway. And Unit 12, silence. Longer this time. Then he has seniority. That response chilled me. Not sentimental. Not nostalgic. Administrative. Like tenure. Like tenure on a road that isn't ours. At 2:26, Vale stumbled slightly. He touched his radio. Keyed it. We heard his voice on our modern digital channel. Dispatch. Fidek, he looked at his hand. Confused, he keyed again. But this time, his transmission came through the legacy analog band. Clear. Unit 17 to dispatch. I'm at mile marker 244. Why is the road empty? The administrative line crackled. He does not retain full alignment memory, meaning he remembered their side more than ours. At 2027, seismic pulses spiked sharply. Exchange event. The camera flickered. The patrol vehicle behind Vale shimmered. Then, in a single frame, it vanished. No fade. No departure. Just absence. Vale remained, standing alone on Highway 180. At 2:28, I made a decision that broke every containment protocol. I dispatched 2 units. Inside the window, Louise stared at me. You're escalating amplitude. I know. But if Vale was physically here, then this wasn't theoretical. This was tangible. At 2031, our deputies reached mile marker 244. They saw him. Not overlay. Not ghost. Deputy Aaron Vale stood in the lane. Alive. Confused. As if he just stepped out of his cruiser mid-shift. He asked them what year it was. They didn't answer immediately. At 2:33, the administrative line rang again. I didn't pick up. At 2:33, seismic pulses intensified dramatically. Amplitude up 60%. Phase tightening accelerating. At 2:36, the other dispatch voice broke through on open frequency. You were violating withdrawal. At 2:37, Vale clutched his head. Said the road was narrowing. Our deputies looked around. They saw nothing unusual. But Vale insisted there were 2 highways. Aligned. Perfectly aligned. At 2:38, he screamed. Said, he's coming. At 2:39, headlights appeared behind him. Faint. Offset. Then perfectly centered. Unit 12. Approaching. And for the first time, it wasn't passing through. It was aligning directly with Vale's position. If 2 units from opposite phases occupy the same coordinates at full alignment, it won't be a shallow dent. It won't be a cracked windshield. It will be a correction. And correction doesn't preserve duplicates, it eliminates one. When Vale screamed, both deputies and the cruiser swore the night air felt heavier. Not wind. Not pressure like before a storm. Weight. Like something compressing downward. At 2039-12, the faint headlights behind Vale intensified. Not brighter. Clearer. The outline of a cruiser formed in the darkness. Boxy frame. Older model. Unit number 12 on the door. No flicker. No offset. It was aligned. Perfectly. Vale turned slowly. He saw it. And he didn't run. He stepped forward. 1 step. Like someone approaching a mirror. Our deputy shouted at him to move. He didn't seem to hear them. At 2039-24, seismic monitors outside the corridor registered the highest amplitude spike we've ever recorded. 87% above baseline. The air felt like static. Deputy Jensen later said his skin tingled, like standing too close to power lines. The cruiser behind Vale accelerated. Not fast. Steady. 40 miles per hour maybe. But the distance between them was no more than 20 feet. There should have been an impact sound. Metal on metal. Body thrown. Glass shattering. There was nothing. At 2039-31, the headlights overlapped Vale's body, and both disappeared. Not violently. Not explosively. They just weren't there. The space they occupied shimmered for half a second, like heat distortion on asphalt. Then the road was empty. Our deputies slammed their brakes, jumped out, ran to the spot. Nothing. No debris. No tire marks. No body. No cruiser. Not even the faint perpendicular asphalt line we saw after the semi-incident. Just clean pavement. At 2:40, the administrative line rang again. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Exchange complete," the woman said. My throat felt dry. "What did you do?" "Balance restored." "Where is Vale?" "He returned to assigned phase." "And Whitlow?" Silence. "Then he remains." "Why?" "Seniority." There it was again. Like this was tenure. Like the overlap operates on rules that feel bureaucratic to them. "You said 3 of yours were here." "Yes." "And now?" 2. Which means Vale wasn't the only one to cross back tonight. Something else must have moved. I didn't ask who. I was focused on the empty highway in front of my deputies. "Why did it escalate?" I asked. "Your presence. We had dispatched units inside the window. We broke withdrawal. We increased amplitude. You forced alignment," she said. "You forced it," I replied. Balance required correction. At 2:42, the seismic pulses began to diminish. At 2:43, RF duplication softened. At 2:44, atmospheric pressure normalized faster than usual. The phase was widening again, stabilizing, like nothing had happened. At 2047, one of our deputies radioed something that made my blood run cold. "Sheriff, there's a vehicle parked at 238. We hadn't sent anyone there. Traffic was still diverted. They drove south." At mile marker 238 on the shoulder sat an older patrol cruiser. Box frame. Different paint. Unit number 23. We've never had a Unit 23 either. Engine cold. No driver inside. Registration inside the glove box read, Canyon District Sheriff's Office. Assigned to Deputy Laura Bennett. Badge number 604. Missing in their phase, I assume. At 2000, 50-50, the administrative voice came back without ringing. "Just open channel. You have received exchange. You left a vehicle. Correction. You said 2 of yours remain here." "Yes. So why leave another?" Pause. Then, not ours. That's when I understood. The exchange isn't symmetrical every time. When alignment tightens, sometimes correction overshoots. Vale returned to them. Whitlow remained with them. But something else crossed without authorization. Maybe their deputy Bennett crossed accidentally during the exchange event. Maybe she's somewhere on our side right now. Maybe she doesn't know she crossed. At 2:55, I asked the question that's been building in my head for weeks. What happens when phase reaches 0 offset? Silence. Then, slowly, primary phase will absorb secondary. Which is primary? Another pause. Then the answer, determined by stability. That means whichever side maintains lower amplitude, lower traffic, lower interference, greater withdrawal, wins. This isn't supernatural, it's competitive. The side that reduces disruption prolongs offset. The side that increases amplitude risks absorption. And tonight, because we sent units into the corridor, we nearly lost alignment. If Vale had not stepped forward, if Unit 12 had reached him without alignment stabilization, maybe both sides would have lost a deputy. Maybe the roads would have fused. Maybe one county would overwrite the other entirely. At 3003, the window closed. Clean air, clean radio. Our deputies returned shaken but intact. Vale was gone. No paperwork, no body. No evidence he was ever physically there except the camera footage and 3 officers' statements. And the abandoned Unit 23 cruiser sitting at mile marker 238, which we towed quietly before sunrise. Now here's the part that keeps me up. If they're tracking balance, if they're correcting discrepancies, then they are monitoring us the same way we monitor them. And if one more of ours crosses without return, If Whitlow is counted permanently on their side, then they may initiate another correction, not to exchange one, but to absorb one. And if absorption occurs at full alignment, there won't be a shimmer. There won't be silence. There will be only one version of Highway 180 left, and I don't know if it will be ours or Canyon District's, but whichever survives will believe the other one was the anomaly, and will never know a replacement happened. After Vale vanished the second time, after the exchange completed and the phase widened, I realized something that forced me to make a final decision. We cannot win this. We can only delay it. The overlap isn't an accident. It isn't malfunction. It isn't haunting. It's jurisdiction. Two counties occupying the same geography on slightly offset phases of time. Between 2017 and 3:03 a.m., Highway 180 belongs to both of us. And if alignment ever reaches zero offset, only one side remains primary. The other becomes overwritten or corrected or absorbed, whatever term you prefer. 3 days after the exchange, I received one final call on the administrative backline. 2:22 a.m. Inside the window. We had withdrawn again. Full silence. No patrol presence anywhere near the triangle. I answered without speaking. The woman's voice was calmer than before. Offset stabilizing. For how long, I asked. Dependent on activity. How long if we withdraw permanently? Silence. Then indefinite separation, which means if we never drive that corridor during the window, if we never transmit, never monitor, never interfere, the roads remain separate, forever. But you'll still operate during that time, I said. Yes. Then the highway belongs to you for 46 minutes every night. Pause. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. That's the compromise. We surrender the corridor between 2017 and 333. They do not push alignment. We do not increase amplitude, stable offset, two realities coexisting without merging. What happens if someone accidentally enters? I asked. Phase tightening. And correction? If required, meaning another exchange, another disappearance, another deputy stepping into alignment. I asked one last question. Why 2017? There was a long pause before she answered. Because that is when deviation occurred. Whitlow, 1998. The first crossing, the first imbalance, the first unsanctioned overlap. Before 1998? I asked. No shared corridor, which means this wasn't ancient, it wasn't prehistoric. It started when two patrol units crossed perfectly aligned coordinates during compression. One never returned, and the road split into two phases. Since then, both sides have been managing the damage. Quietly, without paperwork, without acknowledgement. Just withdrawal. Just balance. Just silence. At 3:33, the line went dead. We haven't heard from Canyon District since. And we haven't entered the triangle during the window. Not once. We reroute traffic nightly. We enforce soft road closures disguised as maintenance. We schedule patrol shifts around it. We never key legacy frequencies during that time. We never deploy monitoring equipment. Because amplitude increases overlap. And overlap risks alignment. Now here's why I'm telling you this. Not because I want attention. Not because I want you scared. But because if you ever drive through northern Arizona at night, if you ever find yourself on Highway 180 around 2016 a.m., and you notice the lane markers feel closer, the shoulders narrower, the forest leaning inward, slow down. If your dashboard clock jumps, if your GPS drifts east, if you see a second highway slightly offset by inches, do not accelerate, do not panic. And if you see headlights ahead that don't make sense, turn around. Not because of a ghost, not because of danger in the way you think, but because you may be crossing into a corridor that does not belong to your phase. Between 2017 and 3003, Highway 188 is shared jurisdiction. 2 dispatch centers, 2 patrol rotations, 2 sets of deputies who believe they are primary. We maintain offset by absence. They maintain offset by absence. They maintain offset by order. If alignment ever reaches 0, correction won't be subtle. It won't be a dent and a bumper. It won't be a missing person report. It will be cartography rewritten. One version of this county will remain, and the other will be archived in memory that only one side retains. If you've ever driven that stretch at night and felt something off time stretching, distance compressing, tell me in the comments, especially if you were there around 2017, because every now and then we still get reports, unfounded sightings, false 911 calls, brief carrier signals on analog bands no one uses anymore, and sometimes, very faintly at exactly 2019 AM, Unit 12 still keys his mic and waits for dispatch to answer. We don't answer anymore, because the safest way to keep both roads alive is to let each side believe the other one is just interference. And if you're watching this from somewhere outside Arizona, check your county's patrol logs. Look at the quietest hour of the night. If it's too quiet, if it's always the same minute, you might not be alone on your road either. Just remember this: if the lane markers start moving inward, you're not crazy. You're early, and if you make it to 3003 without crossing alignment, you're still in your phase. Stay that way.